Hey, I'm with the Defiant. I've been covering DeFi, Web3 for the past year and a half, and still embarrassingly learning and feel woefully uninformed all the time. But I'm very excited to be here and be hosting this panel.
Hey guys, I'm Rahul. I'm filling in for Arjun. He was supposed to be here, but he's not here. I'm a co-founder of Connext. We work on interoperability and cross-blockchain bridges for a long time now. Yep.
And I'm Sara. I'm a smart contract engineer at Uniswap Labs. Super stoked to be here with you all today.
My name is Eric Tang. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Livepeer. We're building the decentralized video streaming infrastructure for Web3.
Hey, I'm Roneil Rumburg. I'm one of the co-founders of Audius, a music distribution service that connects artists and fans directly and uses the graph too.
I'm Mike Sall. I'm one of the co-founders of Goldfinch, which is a decentralized credit protocol bringing all of global credit markets on-chain and expanding access to capital.
Cool. All right. So first question, starting with the basics. What is a protocol? How do you think about it as opposed to a company? Where does a protocol end and a company start? Because sometimes there are two entities operating at once.
So a protocol is a standard way for a set of actors to coordinate around a shared set of resources or a system. And it's important to kind of say it like that because you don't have any concept of like smart contracts or off-chain, on-chain, anything like that. Because if you think about it, like TCP IP is a protocol, HTTP is a protocol. Also, the graph is a protocol. Also, Uniswap is a protocol. So any of these things have to be categorized in a protocol. So it's important to have like a very generic definition.
Yeah, and I think kind of adding on there to talk about protocols in Web3 specifically, I always like to say it's sort of a series of smart contracts that enable on-chain actions. So, in Uniswap's case, the Uniswap protocol is, this sort of suite of, non-upgradable persistent contracts that together create an AMM. And the on-chain actions it allows are this sort of peer-to-peer market making and swapping. And just to kind of bring it back to Web3, that's sort of how I would describe a protocol overall.
Yeah, I definitely second to you guys' definition. I think of it as kind of a way for multiple parties to work together and align incentives so that people can be self-interested but still work together to create something that's long-term sustainable.
Yeah, I love your definition, Rahul, of that. I think that that kind of common interface through which disconnected actors can work together towards some common goal or common direction. That feels like the right way to think about it. And I think in the crypto ecosystem, like adding incentives, native incentives around the development and furtherment of that base protocol is one of the unique innovations that exists here. But yeah, I love that definition.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the same things here. I think about it as an important thing here is having a common set of rules that everyone is agreeing to, and then you can build communities on top of it. But we all need to have this set of rules that can coordinate everything that we're doing.
And do you need a token to kind of coalesce all those incentives together? Because, yeah, I mean, I think of Bitcoin as the first time I really heard that word get thrown around, but then at the same time, HTTP and the other kind of Web 1 protocols didn't really have a token. So do you guys feel like to incentivize continuous development, you need a token, or do you need like a company or an equity-bearing organization that is kind of incentivized to push the project forward?
I think, in my opinion, a protocol is not a company. It's a public infrastructure. So it's public goods. Protocol directly should not make money. I think it should allow other actors within the protocol to make money, but I think protocols themselves shouldn't be making money. They should be public infrastructure, public goods. And because of that, I think it's very important to have a token, because I think tokens are the best mechanism that we have today to fund ongoing development of a protocol without having to charge protocol fees or something like that.
Yeah, and I think in Uniswap's case, the Uni token is a way to give power to the community and to users in the future success of the protocol. And we've seen a lot of success there with, for example, governance recently enabled the 1 BIP fee tier on V3, which in a couple of months, you saw the protocol essentially gain dominance in a lot of the stablecoin to stablecoin market share. So there is a lot of really great and positive change you can do when you have a token that governs a protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the only case where you don't need a token would be if you're super confident that you got the protocol right the first shot, and then you never need to change it again, and that's just deployed, and you're done. Then you don't need a token. And if you need to iterate on the protocol and continue to make changes and have this community around it and coordinate, then the token is probably the most effective way for like a coordination point.
Yeah, maybe I'll take the other side of this, which is I think tokens are a very helpful, useful solution to kind of the tragedy of the commons problem, which is what typically befalls these common goods and common utilities that are kind of in the hands of the world. But I think in Web 1 times, actually, there were centralized standard setting bodies like W3C and others that were able to, there are multiple versions of HTTP, for example, right? And having SSL and all these other things be developed on top, for example, that required some kind of disparate parties to coordinate with one another to agree upon that standards. You needed browser makers to support it. Then you needed, like the Apache web servers of the world to support it as well. But I think those standards have languished over time because of this tragedy of the commons problem, right? Like, what incentive do Google and Facebook and whomever have to continue to pay into those things? Their incentive is actually to make sort of their own solutions, these problems that are not open and not standards compliant, because it locks people into their systems, right? So I think it is possible, certainly, to have protocols exist and be, HTTP is testament to that, right? Like, that is successful without a token. But I think it's worth talking about, like, what is a token solving for, and I think it is incentive alignment across these groups to kind of improve upon or make better this set of common goods.
Yeah, I agree with that too. The token is helpful for the coordination part and making decisions around changing the system. But I think for the system itself, a token shouldn't be required. In terms of the actual economics of how the system works, it shouldn't require the token to make the economics make sense. Like, the economics should make sense without any token, and then the token can be helpful for bootstrapping activity and reinforcing the incentives and then coordinating decisions to change the system. But with the system itself, it should work without any token involved.
Right, like a good example is like Uniswap, right? For years it didn't have a token, it worked great. And then the token just like adds to it, I think. So it's a good example.
And it's a mixed bag, because Bitcoin, like, at its very heart, needs the token, or else the security of the network isn't there. So, I guess it's it's a bit of everything. And all right, just a question, like, when you guys have, we kind of touched on this already, but when you have a protocol, do you think of it as, like, are you constantly developing it based on governance or your own choices, or do you think it's like you deploy the code and then you let it go? Even Bitcoin is under continuous development, but like HTTP, I'm not sure if HTTP is still like being worked on or something like that. So what do you guys think of as decentralization? Like, does decentralization mean totally immutable code? You submitted it, like Sara, I know you said that Uniswap, like V2, no one can change it even if they wanted to, whereas maybe younger protocols can be changed, or maybe they're always in a state of flux. Like MakerDAO is very decentralized, but also the code is still being changed, as far as I know. So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you want to go ahead?
Go for it.
Well, in terms of our own experience with upgradability, like, we started our last version, our current version is not upgradable. And of course, it's very hard to get things right on the first try, like you said. So then you might have some issues which end up being like huge user experience issues where you have to move liquidity from one contract to another contract, and you have to coordinate like a decentralized set of actors to make these migrations. Like in our case, it was hard because we have like these routers who are liquidity providers who are running software. We have to get them to pull their liquidity out of the old contract and the new contract. So with our new system, basically what we said is we want things to be fully upgradable. We will go through like DAO governance to upgrade things. And I think it can work actually if you use an upgradable system, but I think it's very important to have like time locks, governance, things like that. Like if you give people the chance to exit the protocol if they're not happy with the upgrade, then I think it's fair to say that upgradability can be part of the protocol.
Yeah, and I think in Uniswap's case, immutability is sort of a key feature of the suite of smart contracts. And really that's just to guarantee that, something like social collusion couldn't change the code in a malicious way. I think another way to think about this is that upgradability sometimes may, sacrifice the trust that a user has in the code. If somewhere down the line that code might change. And so that's been like a really key thing, I think, with the versions of the Uniswap protocol.
Yeah, for Livepeer, it's been 5 years since we've been working on it. It's always been upgradable, mostly because we knew that from the very beginning this was going to be a long-term project. We mapped out like a 7-year plan when we first started, and we knew we needed to have multiple phases. So in order to take account for that, we've always had upgradability. I do think for a project like Livepeer, where we're trying to provide video streaming infrastructure, just given that video streaming is constantly changing, the streaming protocol itself is constantly changing, the needs are constantly changing, I do think the protocol itself will also need to be upgradable over time. But of course with clear governance principles and all the things that were mentioned. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's most interesting or really different about on-chain like crypto native protocols from like a traditional protocol is that there's kind of this like singleton aspect to it. The code that is running that single incantation of the system on chain is the protocol in a sense. Whereas like when that term was created, it was actually referring to like a document, right? A document that explained how, two machines could talk to one another or something like that. So upgrading the protocol meant just making a new document. And then if, the two people interacting could both support that new standard, then things worked. I think so upgradability was never really a question that people, I think, in that world had to like contend with. Whereas today, obviously, it is, right? Because the code that powers these things is actually kind of indelibly part of the protocol, especially once liquidity and things are layered into that specific singleton incantation of it, right? Like if you just went and deployed your own Uniswap and well, I guess someone did that, but didn't maybe work out so well for them. It's not the same. So I think you need upgradability to be something that's thought about, and so long as there is a well understood path for how you could migrate from one version to another through the community. And our take on it at Audius has been so the network launched formally 2 years ago, and all of the on-chain bits of the network and then all the off-chain code, which is effectively the only acceptable versions of that off-chain code being run by node operators, are managed by an on-chain registry. All of that is controlled by the token holders via this DAO structure. So simple, just a straightforward place to start, and it's worked well for us so far. But it means that upgrading requires a lot more coordination, buy-in, excitement from a lot of different parties, as mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely trade-offs. And when I think about immutability, it's also highly affected by the kinds of activity that's happening on the protocol. So think about Uniswap, and you do a single transaction, and then you're done. It's pretty self-contained in that transaction. It doesn't matter if that code isn't changing after that fact. Then Goldfinch, which is upgradable, there are businesses in Brazil and Nigeria and Indonesia who are taking out 3 to 4 year loans through Goldfinch. And so the community is going to need to keep adding new features and making these kinds of loans work in better ways. And so the upgradability is really important because it has to evolve and change over time.
Yeah, I would say there's also like multiple types of upgradability and upgrade paths, right? Like even Uniswap's example, like the code is immutable, but there's versions of protocols, and I think that in itself is like the path for upgrading, right?
Right.
Like in Livepeer, we've actually done both types of upgrades where we've changed the underlying logic of the smart contract via a governance process, but we've also done like the recent upgrade for the protocol is moving from layer 1 Ethereum to Arbitrum, and that was deploying a whole new set of smart contracts, then helping people migrate their stake from L1 to L2, right, where you have both protocols running, but people can kind of move between the two.
Cool. All right. And what do you think? Are there things that have stood out in terms of like since? I mean, I joined the space in 2017-ish. Like that we've learned in the past 4 years. I mean, Luna is kind of like a depressing thing that I'm like, did we learn anything? But we definitely have. So I'm just like, what have you learned? What have you learned as far as protocol development in the past, and like looking forward? Are there things that you think we should do differently in terms of how we communicate with stakeholders, how we choose to deploy tokens? Yeah, just like moving forward, because I mean, obviously, it's the beginning of a bear market, and it might be a bear market for a couple of years. So
That's when I go this way.
Yeah. Let's switch it up. I hate that we're like just doing.
Oh, I don't know. I would say something that I think I've learned is how important it is that the underlying usage of the protocol should start with real needs that are being served. That's why with Goldfinch we started with going to emerging markets and providing loans in those places, because we could clearly see the need, and then how do we use the interoperable systems of DeFi and crypto to like serve that need, and that sets up a stronger foundation versus like I don't know other things that maybe will don't do as well afterwards. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, honestly, it's a bit frustrating, or I feel it's frustrating that we haven't yet, or it doesn't feel like as a community we've yet learned how to onboard like larger groups of users and more mainstream users to being able to use these tools, engage in these ecosystems. I think too much of what we do is like building for each other and building for this same existing set of people that have already been in things. But I think it's been really, really cool. Or what I feel like we have learned this cycle and coming out of it is that consumer audiences are getting excited about and can get excited about the value props and utility that like decentralization can provide them. I think there's a level of cultural awareness today around data privacy, around self-sovereign kind of operation of businesses, everything else that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. And I would like to think that some of all of our work in this ecosystem has helped some of that. But yeah, there's a lot more to do.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely second that. The kind of, I think the value of what Web3 creates is much more crisper now, right, than like, years ago when we first developed or were developing these protocols. Like one of the big lessons that I've learned in protocol development itself is like thinking about the pace of change and thinking about the technical choices that we make. We can't look at things from a 5-year time horizon when we're making these changes, because you just don't know what happens on the base layer infrastructure. So we always look at things from a, say, like 8 to 16 months time horizon, right? Where you know that the technical choices that you make in that time frame can carry you through that period, and then you have to make new choices.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think I sort of have the opposite experience, where a lot of the things that we build, we really try to build them for the long term. These are things that should exist forever and live, on chain forever. And so there is sort of that theme underlying a lot of what we build. But kind of thinking about the future, I think, something I'm more excited about especially with the Uniswap protocol, is I think we're seeing a lot more of like a multi-chain, cross-chain world unfold, and especially with sort of the open sourcing of the protocol's deployment scripts and documentation and stuff, we'll start to see the protocol live on a lot more, L2s and other chains and things like that. So that's, I think, something I'm really excited about going forward.
That's awesome, because that's where Connext lives, so I'm excited to hear that. And, to echo what you two said, I think, we always said at Connext that we are building for the next 50 years. We're not, the protocol that generates the most hype right now is not the one that's going to win. It's the one that really invests in the right kinds of things so that it's going to be around forever. And I think that's the cool thing about blockchains. We can create these things that are just going to be around forever. And even after we're gone, that's why it's really important to have this autonomous kind of infrastructure that runs itself, like us all as protocol developers, we don't even want to be part of this anymore. We just want to develop it and leave it to like the decentralized like forces and different incentives to like run itself forever.
Cool. All right, we hit it. That was 20 minutes? That's what that thing says. All right.
Thank you
Cool.
guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.